So chapter 13 is the last chapter on exam 2. Prokaryotes, we already know there's archaea and bacteria. I don't know. We're going to skip that. We're just going to skip those. We're going to skip ahead here. Prokaryotes can make you sick. You know this, probably. You've heard of things like tuberculosis, the plague, Black Death, typhoid, bad diseases. Prokaryotes. They cause epidemics, they cause pandemics. What's the difference between an epidemic and a pandemic? Locally, everyone is really sick. Worldwide, everybody is really sick. A lot of what has happened, though, we can control. Having clean water, access to clean water is like the #1 way we can make sure that people aren't getting these diseases. A lot of them. But also, not having rats running around the city biting people. Another way to make sure we're not going to have the plague going from person to person. But now we're dealing with some other problems. We're dealing with an antibiotic crisis. Who has gone to the doctor, I'm really sick, give me a medication, and they're like, antibiotics won't help you. That just happened. Can you take antibiotics for the cold? Common cold? It won't help you. It's caused by a virus. What we've discovered, though, is some of our bacteria are now becoming resistant to antibiotics. The most important one of those, perhaps you've heard of, is MRSA. It's a staph infection that is resistant to almost all strains of antibiotics, if not all strains of antibiotics. It doesn't mean that if you get it, you will die. It just means that if you get it, it's really hard to treat. And where is the #1 place that people contract MRSA?
In the showers.
All of those are wrong.
The hospital?
That is correct. The hospital. Because that's the disease that they get there because of all the use of antibiotics and things like that. It thrives there because it's the only thing that survives in that situation, all the antibiotics. Foodborne illnesses. Botulism is not just for Botox. Botulism kills people when it comes from improperly stored canned goods and things like that. When animal waste contaminates our water, gets us sick, we fix that with improved sanitation. Let's talk about how prokaryotes can help us. Flip side of botulism is Botox. I'm not really sure I'm going to consider that helpful, which is why there's a question mark. But for some people, I think your book considers that helpful. It's where we get Botox from. Genetic engineering, we've learned, can be helpful. Medical products. Yogurt, cheese, kombucha, fermented foods, alcohol, all come from prokaryotes. Yeast is mainly going to be involved in a lot of this stuff, but also bacteria. Bioremediation is the idea of using bacteria to break down toxins and other things in the environment. We're trying to engineer, the reason this picture is here is we're trying to engineer bacteria that can eat oil. So you have an oil spill, and you just release like buckets of this bacteria. It eats all the oil, and it cleans the environment for us. How amazing would that be? Love it. Do you have bacteria in your body? Your gut, full of bacteria. Do you have bacteria on your body? Lots of it. And we somehow believe right now the bacteria on your skin actually helps to keep you healthy. Which, as one of my students likes to point out, this is why you should never use massive quantities of hand sanitizer. And instead, washing your hands is better. It doesn't kill your good bacteria. So next time we are going to talk about protists. So our last thing for this exam is the idea of the protists. The protists are pretty diverse as to what's in here. And this is the definition I told you last time I really like for protists, because it's not really a definition as we think of definitions, but it's probably the best one we have. They are mostly unicellular eukaryotes. that are not animals, not fungi, not plants. So that mostly unicellular means that most of them are single cells. Some of them are multicellular, though. They are all eukaryotes. What does it mean to be a eukaryote? What do you have? A nucleus. And they are not animals, not fungi, not plants. They go from unicellular to colonial, meaning that there's a group of them living together, maybe cooperatively living together, maybe as almost like an organism, to multicellular, being a large organism. Maybe you've heard of kelp, the brown seaweed that is found off the coast of California, forms the kelp forests. Kelp is a protist. Algae falls under protist. There are kelp plants that are over 30 meters long, so they are very much multicellular. And some of the protists are very weird. They are multinucleate. That means that, do you know how when we do mitosis in the cell cycle, we have cytokinesis to divide the two daughter cells? They go through mitosis without doing cytokinesis. So they have lots of cells that have multiple nuclei. This is one of the only groups where we see that. Most protists are aquatic, meaning they live in water. Some of them do not live in the water, but they live on ice or in mud or other areas that are wet environments. Some of them have a contractile vacuole. This is think of this as like kind of like your bladder or something. They use it for water regulation, for keeping and then expelling water from their bodies. Well, not their bodies, their cells. They range from microscopic to over 200 meters in size. Some of them live completely on their own. Some of them are symbionts, meaning that they live inside of something and they benefit it. We see this in coral reefs. The coral is an animal, but inside of it lives something called zooxanthellae, which is a protist. A lot of them are parasites, so they'll make you sick. And then a good number of them are also decomposers, meaning that they break things down. They recycle material so that we don't all live in a world of trash. And generally, they can move. It's a pretty good list of understanding of how these animals are. Most of them do asexual reproduction. A lot of them are photosynthetic. But some of them are heterotrophs. If they're a heterotroph, we call them a protozoan. That zo part in there means animal-like. So they're heterotrophs, they're going to eat food, they can't do photosynthesis, and they're going to be animal-like protists. Like the amoebas are going to fall in that group. Some protists are medically important. There's missing a T there. What causes malaria? Protist. You get it from a mosquito, but it's caused by a protist. There's a lot. We're going to go over a couple of them. I'm not going to test you on the medically important ones, but I'm going to mention some of them because you should know about them. And they're of ecological importance. We'll see that as we get to algae. This is type of a family tree for your protists. I'm not going to quiz you on it, but in case you're wondering how everybody fits together, I wanted to give you that family tree. And diseases. Malaria is caused by Plasmodium. Plasmodium, what it does is it is a protist that is transmitted to you by a mosquito. As it gets into your body, it makes you sick. And then it acts by bursting your red blood cells. That's how it kills people. It gets into the red blood cells and it's going to burst them. It can't do it if you have sickle cell, but if you have normal blood cells, it will burst them. What do your red blood cells carry? Does anyone remember? Oxygen. How well do you live without oxygen? You don't. So that would definitely kill you if it burst all your red blood cells. Have you heard of dysentery? You're laughing because you know what it is? You may not have heard of dysentery that way. How many of you have heard of people, though, going abroad and having diarrhea often?
Not me.
We're getting to the idea of dysentery there. The idea of extreme intestinal discomfort and diarrhea is going to fall under what categorizes part of dysentery. The risk is that you could get dehydrated, but also it's really uncomfortable. It can be caused not just by food poisoning, but by things in the water that are making people sick. Could be amoebas, could be other things. And the one that causes it frequently is Entomoebia histolytica. Don't get it. Giardia is another one that causes intestinal discomfort. If you drink contaminated water, this is what you get that makes you sick. It's fairly common in areas where water has been contaminated by usually like feces in the United States and Mexico. Who wants to have sleeping sickness? Anyone? That's good. It isn't just that you want to sleep all the time. Trypanosoma causes it. It is another type of protist, and it will cause you to sleep a lot, yes, but it also causes a lot of other systemic problems. And in case you wanted to know more about how malaria works, I gave you this, but we're going to skip it because of now. Protists don't just make you sick. They can also be parasites on plants. The example up here is dealing with downy and powdery. It should be powdery. Mildew. What do you know about mildew? Where does it grow? So mildew is found in wet, moist conditions. The downy mildew affects grapes. It's why the French wine industry almost collapsed in the 19th century. Anyone know what the what's going on in this picture? Who wants to eat what's in picture B? This is the result of a potato that has been contaminated by the potato blight. Potato blight caused a famine in what country? Ireland. So close in the 1900s. I think it's something. And then we have some beneficial parts. Plankton, which you saw multiple laps ago, are the foundation for aquatic food webs. There's very few plants in the ocean or in lakes and streams, so plankton are going to provide the base of the food web. These are going to be algae and things like that, diatoms, dinoflagellates. They're going to provide the base of our food chain. A lot of protists do carbon fixation, which means they're doing photosynthesis. They're taking carbon out of the atmosphere and making it into sugar, which is then food for other things. Those algae also produce a lot of oxygen. I mentioned that coral contains zooxanthellae. Coral themselves are animals, but healthy coral has this greenish-yellow color to it that comes from the zooxanthellae. Some of them also have bright colors to them as well. The zooxanthellae live inside the coral animals, but the coral does not eat them. It provides them with a home, and the zooxanthellae then provides it with a level of sugar. So the zooxanthellae gets protection inside the coral gets sugar from the zooxanthellae, everybody is happy. Next one is termite stomachs. What do termites eat? Can termites digest wood? No. But the protists that live in their stomachs can. So the termites eat the wood, the protists living in their stomachs digest it, and then they are able to get energy from it. But the protists in their stomach have no way of getting at the wood unless the termite eats it. And then we have decomposers and saprophytes that eat dying and dead things that are going to recycle that material back into the soil so that the next round of plants can get access to the nutrients. And we're going to look at some individually too. But first, some pictures. Because I think you should have an idea of what these organisms look like. You have foraminiferum over there at the top. Forms a nice little shell around itself that it lives inside of. That shell is remarkably microscopic. You could probably, not enough to fit on like a period at the end of a sentence, but definitely would fit on, these sometimes look like grains of sand, sometimes a little bit larger than that, these shells. We have a ciliate down beneath that, which is going to be more of an animal-like organism. And then over here we have a red algae. The picture looks strange up projected on the screen. The purple portions are the algae, the black color is shadows. And not all red algae is red. Some is going to look pink, some is going to look purple. Sometimes it looks brown too. Ready? Diatoms make glass shells for themselves. These are the leftover shells of fossilized diatoms. There's a whole lot of different varieties and species on this slide. Then we have a serratium, which is a dinoflagellate, a green alga, and an amoeba. All different types of protists. I'm going to start with protozoans, then we're going to go back to algae. So our protozoans include a number of different groups. A lot of them are flagellates. A flagellate is going to be then a protist who moves by means of a flagella. So they're going to beat their flagella, their tail-like structure, to move from one place to another. The biggest group of these is the euglenoids. Basically the biggest group, I think. Let's see if I can catch up to you guys on my slides. There's about 1,000 species of euglenoids. They're freshwater, unicellular organisms. So freshwater means that they're found in lakes and ponds. They're not going to be found in the ocean. Unicellular means single cellular. About a third of them have chloroplasts, which means they can do photosynthesis. The other 2/3 don't. And even those who can do photosynthesis might still eat other food items. As a group, they have 2 flagella. They have a long one and a shorter one, and both are used in movement. They just direct it and allow it to move in different ways. And then it starts to get weird. These are single-celled organisms, but they have an eye spot. It's not an actual eye, but the eye spot is a photoreceptor. The photoreceptor means that it's going to detect light. So they're able to see light and shadows, and that helps them as they're moving through the area where they live, moving towards the sun, away from the sun, things like that. And they do. Then we have some parasitic flagellates. We have the one that causes seeping sickness, the trypanosoma brucei. Then we have trypanosoma cruzi, which causes Chagas disease. This is becoming more and more common in Central America and up through Mexico. Leishmaniasis is a disease that is in the same grouping as those. It's a skin disease that's transmitted by sand flies. Giardia is from this group, the one that causes severe intestinal discomfort. And then there are actually STDs that fall in this grouping. It's kind of weird to think of them as being part of the same group that can do photosynthesis. That's why that protozoan definition is so interesting of a grouping because it includes things that make you sick, as well as algae and organisms that make their own little shells that they live inside of. It's a very wide group of organisms. Amoeboids are a different group entirely. They do not have a flagella. They move by the movement of pseudopods. To get a pseudopod, they're going to stick out one of these extension structures that they have, pushing their cell membrane out in one direction, and like a snail, their cell is going to come along after it. So what happens is the cytoplasm is going to move in that direction, and it's going to pull the whole cell along. So they stick out one extension, and they move towards it. The way you would think of a snail moving is kind of how these things are going to move through the water. And what's happening is their whole body is streaming then in that direction. All the cytoplasm is moving the way that the cell membrane moved. But they don't just move with pseudopods. They also use them like tentacles, and they're going to wrap them around food items they want to eat. And as they do that, the food item is going to be engulfed inside of them. They don't have stomachs, though. So when they move their arm around something and it gets engulfed, it's actually put inside of a vacuole, because you're going to get that bubble of food and water inside of a cell membrane structure. And that is called a food vacuole. Let me draw how that works. So those red dots are food particles. So that's our amoeba. And eventually maybe it's going to send a pseudopod out. Mark across will be indoors. It's going to send a pseudopod out, and it's going to kind of pull that into itself. And then you're going to have a food vacuole inside. Does that make sense? I'm going to erase this because I'm really paranoid of the red shade of erase. So these groups will not have, this group does not have chloroplasts. It cannot do photosynthesis. They reproduce asexually by mitosis. They just split in half. Who saw an amoeba in that lab? Anybody? So sad. They're very cool because you can see them like wandering around your microscope slide. Foraminifers and radiolarians are two different ones that are animals that form shells that their body is going to live inside of. But they form them differently. The foraminifers, their shell is actually called a test. It's not called a shell, but a test. It's made of calcium carbonate. So it's made of something that's very similar to the structure of chalk. The radiolarians make one out of glass, out of silicon. In both of them, they have pseudopods that are at some point in time going to be either extending through the shell, like the forams, or entirely external to the shell, like the radiolarians. And they're going to pull in food items. So the foram, its shell looks somewhat like a snail shell, and you're going to have these pseudopods coming out the opening. Whereas the radiolarians just have all of those holes in them, and you're going to have pseudopods coming out of all the holes and pulling things back in. They build these shells as they grow. And as they continue to grow, these shells are going to increase in size. It's kind of amazing what goes into making these shells, and at the end, they look pretty amazing in ways we wouldn't really understand without looking at a microscope. And this is nice. We have all these little shells. How big do you think deposits of shells get? Does anyone know what that top picture is a picture of, or these bottom two? It's in Europe? Is that your question?
Yeah.
It's in England even. It's called the White Cliffs of Dover. These cliffs are made entirely of calcium carbonate. They are made of deposits of those little shells stocked on top of each other. Because over time, what happens is when these organisms die, their shells sink to the bottom of the ocean, and they get compressed down. And over time, they form rock. At one point in time, places like this were where we actually mined chalk from. We would take this and make chalk from it. We don't anymore. We synthetically make chalk. But we used to use those little shells as chalk because you can compact it. And it was white calcium carbonate material. The organisms themselves look more like what's in the top picture. But when you put them all together, they make these massive, massive structures. Notice the lighthouse there for reference. These are huge structures. Ciliates are a different group, and they are not shockingly covered in cilia. They get their name because as opposed to having the flagellas, as opposed to having pseudopods, they are covered all over their bodies in cilia. Did you see paramecium in the lab? So that would fall into the ciliate group. Most of these animals are protozoans, are free living. They do use paramecium as our classic example, and that's a picture of it here on the screen. There's about 8,000, species that fall into this grouping. 8,000 species of ciliates. It's a whole lot more than I ever expected. They are the most complex of all of our protozoans. Structurally, that is. They have structures called trichocysts. Think of them as little tiny spines or little spears. They're going to use them to defend themselves, but they also use them to capture prey items. So they captured on the trichocyst, and they're going to pass it towards their mouth opening, their oral groove, through the cilia. So they grab it, pass it up to the oral groove. It's then going to come in through a structure called the gullet. It's like the esophagus, where that food particle is going to be put inside of a food vacuole. So this organism has like a knife or a fork that it's going to use to like stab the food. It's then going to use its cilia, or its like hands, to bring it to its mouth or its oral groove, and it's then going to swallow it to its stomach through the gullet structure. How complex is that for a single-celled organism? It's a lot of effort. But these animals are, well, protozoans at least, are one cell. The contractile vacuole is shown up there. This is a structure that does water regulation. When it's full, it's kind of puffed up as a big vacuole structure. When it's not, it contracts in, and it's mainly membrane. They have two nuclei, a macro and a micro nucleus. They even have an anal pore, which they use to, they do sexual reproduction. During sexual reproduction, it's called conjugation. The two cells are going to come together, and they're going to meet. What they're going to do is that their nuclei are going to kind of break down. And they're going to send DNA from one into the other cell, and then DNA from that one back to the first cell. So the way that they do sexual reproduction is literally changing pieces of their nuclei with each other. They will leave then as two genetically different organisms than the way that they came into the equation. So they show up, two organisms, they exchange genetic information, they leave as two new organisms. That's their style of sexual reproduction. It's not going to produce 4. It's just going to produce 2 that are different than the 2 you started with. But it is considered sexual reproduction because there's exchange of genetic material. This is a ciliate. Its name is stentor. It looks like a vase or sculpture. But that opening at the top is going to be where the oral groove is. And you can actually see in this picture all of the little cilia around the edge that are going to be used to make sure that the food gets to the correct location. Is it pretty? It's not ugly, at least for a protist. We could have some really ugly ones. And now we're going to move out of the protozoans onto the algae. I could spend, I don't know, an entire couple weeks on algae. There's that much to learn. We're not going to. We're going to spend like a whole 10 minutes. If you have more questions about algae, let me know. I studied diatoms in my postdoctoral position. I worked with macroalgae in some undergrads, so I think algae is pretty cool. I'm probably one of the only people who can say that statement and actually mean it. But without them, there's not much life in the ocean, and that might be part of the reason why I like them so much. Diatoms are single-celled organisms. They're found in both freshwater and saltwater. They are the base of our aquatic food chains. If we did not have diatoms, we wouldn't have whales. At least not all of them. We wouldn't have nearly the quantity of fish and other things that we have. Diatoms and dinoflagellates, which are our next group, make up a significant portion of the phytoplankton, and they provide most of the food in aquatic ecosystems. Phytoplankton, that word. Let's see if you can guess. What do you think phytoplankton means? What does phyto mean? What does it make you think about? Plankton that perform photosynthesis. Very good. So these are our plankton that use light energy to do photosynthesis. They're going to be our photoplankton, or phytoplankton. No, they're going to be the members of the plankton that are plant-like and that are going to provide then the energy and the sugars to the rest of the food chain. Diatoms are the most numerous unicellular algae in the oceans. And they're made in a really interesting way. Does this look like a single shell to you in this picture? What it is really 2 halves. The one shell sits kind of inside of the other. Think of it as almost like a shoebox structure. You know when you have a shoebox, the top portion or the bottom portion of one lid or of one part covers the top portion of the other? That's the way their shells work. So the one kind of sits on top of the other. We call these different portions halves or valves of their shell. And their shell is also made of silica. So we saw that in our 4M group, that it was made of silica. Yeah, we saw that just with our last group that they had silica. But these are also made of silica. Dinoflagellates are really different. They are a completely different shape, and they have 2 flagella. They are covered in cellulose plates. Does anyone know what other group has cellulose in it?
Just that we recently covered.
We may not have covered it yet. We haven't covered it today. Plants. Plants use cellulose as a structural material. So do dinoflagellates. So these aren't plants, but they use the same structural material that plants do. And their cellulose plates contain silica structures in them too. They have two flagella, one that goes around the body, one that goes longitudinally in the other direction. That way it allows them to move both at the same time to change direction in almost any way that they want to. Most anaflagellates are good. This is what lives inside of the coral. This is what provides a lot of food to the ocean. But a number of them are really problematic. They form conditions known as red tides. And sometimes, when that happens, fish die. People get sick. Lots of bad things happen. Because during a red tide situation, their population is huge. And some of them produce neurotoxins when their population gets to be large. Do you know what a neurotoxin is? It's a substance that is toxic, poisonous, to your nervous system. It can disrupt respiration, so breathing. It can completely kill things outright. And the reason we call it a red tide is that when their populations get remarkably large, the water frequently turns red or brown. So we'll name them a red tide if it's red, brown if it's brown. Populations get large, they produce lots of toxins, it's bad for everything living there, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere these things die out. When they die, the bacteria break them down, use up most of the oxygen in the water, and then even more things die. There's a theory, I'm just going to toss this one out to you, I don't really know what to make of it, we'll see what you think of it, that the reason that the water turned red, the Red Sea turned red, was a red tide. There are organisms that live in the Red Sea that we know can cause red tides. And a red tide doesn't happen like that, but it can form in the span of a day or less. So this would be something that would suddenly turn the water bright red, exist for a while, and then almost as quickly as it showed up, go away. It would be a natural phenomenon that then could explain why the water turned red. Is that an interesting thing to think about? That maybe it was a miracle that utilized a natural process? Who would be really scared if the water turned red in one of our ponds? Or even brown? It would be really creepy. It's not going to happen here. We don't have the right organisms to have that happen. But it happens in coastal areas. And when these things happen, we can close down beaches. We close down fishing areas. We have three colors of algae. Our colors are red, green, and brown. Who eats sushi? You eat algae. Who eats ice cream? Who eats chocolate? Who might wear makeup? Or face creams at least. Red algae is important in your life then. There's red algae is found in warm water. And what is important for you about why I asked about ice cream, chocolate, and cosmetics and face cream is that red algae gives us a compound called carrageenan that is used to make things that are oils and fats creamy. So ice cream, chocolate. A lot of face creams contain oils and things like that. That's going to be part of it. There's brown algae. They're found mostly in cold waters. And green algae are our most numerous. They're found just about anywhere. Some green algae are brown, some are red, some are green. And we're going to take a couple pictures of the algae. This is Spirogyra. It exists in a filament, a chain, end to end. And you can see in this picture where they're doing conjugation. Two chains have lined up together, they're sharing genetic information, and then it's going to leave again. Volvex forms colonies where the cells all live together. Ulva is also called sea lettuce. This probably looks like what is in your sushi. For fungi, just a couple slides. The first slide I have is they're more than mushrooms, and we're not going to talk about the mushrooms. The two things I want to mention here for fungi are that there's two really important beneficial types. There's mycorrhizae, which are fungi living on the roots of plants that provide nitrogen to the plant, and the plant root gives them a place to live and a little bit of sugar. And then there's lichens, which are an algae sandwiched between two layers of fungus. There's our lichen. The fungus keeps the algae that's inside moist, wet. It allows it to continue to live. And they're actually really interesting structures. You see them all over campus if you look closely enough. And then we have the mycorrhizae structures, which are these fungal structures living on plant roots.